and you
Yeah.
might be one of about 800 people a year who get to try, and they're all obviously studs. We have Olympians, we have freaking all-star athletes, we have farm boys who've been pitching bales through their entire life, we have inner city, just practically thugs who are just like incredibly smart, who are vicious, who end up wanting to be SEALs. We got all sorts of cats and dogs. So it's even though it's the most physically challenging, that's not what makes it hard.
Mm.
What makes it hard is the fact that the training is relentless in its misery, and also in the ability of the instructors who are masterful. Each one of them like literally has the equivalent of like a doctorate in psychology, which I know you're getting, in terms of their ability to get under an individual's skin and understand human behavior, and to poke and prod and to find weaknesses and ferret those out. And then the question is, once those weaknesses are ferreted out or exposed, what do you do about it?
Yeah.
And that's where resiliency comes in. That's where adaptability comes in. That's where the ability to, humility to comes in, where you can look at that weakness and that gap in your awesomeness and say, you know what, holy shit, I really can learn from something here, or I need help, and you start to see that it's the team, it's the composition of the team that really makes the SEALs what they are. They call it SEAL teams for a reason. They don't call it SEAL individuals. Hey, I'm going to go work for the SEAL individuals.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of that's unique about the SEALs, that they're just really about ferreting out. The instructors are looking for their next teammates. And you could be the freaking, you can be the sharpest and the baddest person there, but if you're not a good teammate, if you're all about yourself, you're out. They find a way.
Absolutely. And that's the big thing a lot of people don't realize, is that they are looking deep into your soul. They're looking deep into your character, right? Because it's really the character of the guy that you want in your team to be going to war with, to looking at your back and you're looking at their back. And a lot of people don't realize the camaraderie that's in the military in general, but when you get into small teams, and so I worked in small teams and helicopters, teams of 4. You worked in how many's in a SEAL team?
Well, SEAL team, the team itself has got about 130 or 40, but it's broken down into 3 troops, and each troop has 2 platoons. The platoon is the main operating unit, so that would be like 14 to 16 guys.
Yeah, and it's the tightness that you develop, isn't it? There's not many people who go to work on a daily basis knowing that if one of their teammates screws up, that they could all quite possibly die, right? That's a completely different ballgame.
The level of risk is one of the foundations for that bond, but it's also the shared experience of training together and enduring, sucking it up or embracing the suck of the misery every day, day in and day out. And that shared experience, that shared suffering really, strengthens that bond. The level of risk strengthens that bond. And then the ethos, basically, which is enculturated through the training and then you're operating, that you're going to do whatever you can for mission success. You're going to set aside your own egoic needs. We call it checking your ego at the door. And you're never going to leave a teammate behind.
Yeah, that's very, very
that
strong.
That means you even will go to, put your own life at serious risk to get your teammates out of the shit when it happens.
So this bond, it's really interesting. I've been reflecting on this a little bit, and some of my best mates to this day are guys that I went through military training with, right? And it is exactly that shared experience. I don't know if you've had a guy on your podcast called Dr. Stan Beecham.
I have not.
You got to get him on the podcast. He's brilliant. And he said one thing to me that I absolutely loved, and I think it encapsulates this bond. He said, Paul, what a lot of people don't realize is that in order to live your best life, you need to walk up to the edge of yourself and stare into the abyss, right? And I think it's that shared experience, the dance partners, if you like, that you walk up to the edge of your shelves together and stir into the abyss. I
Well,
mean
that's the
that.
thing. It's easier to link arms with someone and walk to the
Mm,
edge, right?
absolutely.
We would actually use that metaphor in our ocean training, because a lot of people, that ocean is an amazing teacher, right?
Mm,
It's just incredibly unforgiving, the cold and the darkness and the power of the ocean. And so we'd lock arms. When we go into the ocean, we've always got a buddy. We literally tie ourselves together on our dives. And some of my most profound insights and trust was developed, in the ocean. And that's kind of an example of them walking up to the edge of the
mm,
abyss together, locked
yeah.
arms. And that really helps you develop courage and trust, which are two of the
Mm.
foundations for a good team, as well as for that bond that we're talking about.
And so tell me about some lessons that you've taken away with you from your time in the SEALs. Is there anything that stands out particularly for you in terms of your personal life, advice for other people, even getting into the leadership thing? What were the big things that you walked away with?
Gosh, Paul, there's so many, but some of the important ones, I think, for leadership and even organizational development, right? One is that developing this level of trust, or having that level of performance with a team, takes a lot of work.
Mm,
And in the military, we took it for granted. It was a lot easier for me to lead a team of elite operators in the SEALs than it is to build a team of elite operators in the civilian world.
mm, mm,
And that's because of we had incredible diversity of thought, race, opinions, kind of perspectives, but we had absolute homogeneity of alignment around the mission and the values of the
mm.
organization. And that piece was all handled by the institution itself,
Yeah.
meaning the type of people who were attracted to the SEALs, then the years long training before you ever got onto an operational team that ferreted all the people out who didn't share the values and it didn't,
Mm,
align around the mission and didn't have that, emotional resiliency and the team ability. And then, and then the mission itself, right, was we were all there because we wanted to serve and we wanted to, uh, basically challenge ourselves in an environment that was hard and risky.
mm.
And so we had this massive homogeneity around the soft, like intrinsic things, whereas we got to benefit from the diversity of our
Yeah.
viewpoints and our
Yeah.
ideas. So that is like the holy grail for a team. And in the civilian world, CEOs they pine for that, or team leaders just pine for that. You can find it, but it takes a lot of effort
Mm,
and discernment to develop that. It's one of the things that we're working on, trying to teach, through my company, SealFit, is like, how do you develop that as a leader in your team? And
mm,
it can be done, but it's going to take a couple years from this, from the starting point to really develop that level of diverse homogeneity that allows for incredible functioning. The second real insight was a lot of people look at leadership and they think it is basically, well, I'm going to be the smartest guy or the most experienced person,
yeah.
right? Because that's why I was, in the SEALs. That's why I was either appointed to a leadership role or I ascended it because of my rank or time in service or a combination of all
Mm,
the above. What I learned was that those are really more management roles. Those are positional roles.
mm,
And whether that person is a leader or not really depended upon their level of humility and their authenticity. So you can have two people who have equal experience, equal rank, equal time in service, and one of them is focused on themselves and their career,
yeah.
and they're really smart. And I had leaders like that who are really smart. I could name some very famous ones, but they weren't great leaders of men in the sense that you and I would think of as great leaders of men, because they were really more into themselves.
Mm, yeah.
Even though they talked words and they did activities that made them look like they were taking care of the troops, you didn't feel it. It was transactional. It wasn't servant, right? And so the service, so leadership had to be like at the extraordinary level is one of service. It's one of humility, and it's one of basic inclusiveness, and it's one where you are elevating everybody else and taking a back seat. At the same time, you have to be able to lead by example. And so it's this real conundrum. It's a dichotomy, right? How do you take a back seat and lead by example simultaneously? Well, you lead by example through how you are showing up and developing yourself, and how you are giving others the credit, and how you are allowing others a voice. Some of the most creative solutions come from the most unlikely of sources.
Absolutely.
And if you're the leader who thinks that they have to have the answers, or they're the most experienced, or the buck stops here, or, I'm in charge, so sit the F down, which is pretty prevalent, then you may be effective, but you're never going to be outstanding. Right? And the outstanding comes from allowing the team, building such trust and respect within the team that the team generates spontaneous and massively creative solutions to the most intractable problems that are 20 times more effective than anything that either you as a leader or any individual, or even the sum of the individuals, could do themselves, right? And so instead of a team of 14 being 1 + 1 + 1, equals 14, that's the strength.
Yeah.
It's, it's logarithmic, like it's massively more powerful in that regard.
Now, you mentioned earlier on purpose, and I want to talk to purpose. Bit of a long question, but I quite like Pat Lencioni's model. I don't know if you've seen it around high performance teams, where it's trust on the bottom, which enables productive conflict, then commitment, then accountability, and then results. And I quite like it, and I think you'd quite like it, being an ex-military guy, because the trust in his model is based on vulnerability, not on predictive trust. But when I run these workshops in Australia, I tend to find that, and there's a nice diagnostic that goes with us, that trust, that deep level of trust, is not often present. And the other thing that's not often present is accountability. And so let's talk about, I want to talk about two things: accountability and purpose as well. And we'll take them separately. So where does accountability play a role from your perspective in teams, in relationships, in personal life, in self-accountability? How important is that for individuals to be their best selves?
Well, it's extraordinarily important. I mean, the essence of a great team is built upon individuals who are radically committed to their own growth. And when you're really committed to your own growth, then accountability flows quite naturally, because the forces that you unlock when you begin to take responsibility for your own growth. When I mean growth, I'm talking about vertical development, which means taking action on a daily basis to evolve your character, to literally know that here's my day, and in this day, I'm going to do things that are going to evolve me, that are going to make me better as a human being. And those things, and that word I just used, being, is the key there. Make me better as a being, not a doing, right? Not a human doing. So it seems kind of ironic to say I'm going to do things that make me be better. But the point is, we always start with some activity for development. And that usually has to do with an activity of, creating a opening for a healing conversation or a connecting conversation, right? Deepening a level of trust in a relationship, because and that would be, Brene Brown would say vulnerability, but that would be, SEALs don't like that term vulnerable, right? Yeah. We're authentic, right? We're real. Yeah. How about that? We're real.
Yeah.
And so but that takes a lot of courage, and it's not common in our culture to open yourself up and say, you know what, I screwed up, or I could see that something's going on with you. Let's talk, and how can I help you with something, or is there something that I'm doing that is causing this situation? So we learned
sorry,
to
Mark.
have those brutally honest conversations, and that was an action. That's a doing
Mm,
that leads to growth, which is changing the way I am, the way I show up, a beingness. That's one example of many things that we in the SEALs and people who are deeply committed to their own growth, their own personal development vertically, meaning up the stages of consciousness, to become more whole, more inclusive, have more perspective, be more compassionate. Others are, practices of introspection, right?
mm, mm,
Mindfulness and
yeah.
visualization and breath work and even breathing together as a team, which has is
Mm,
extraordinarily intimate,
yeah.
experience that synchronizes everybody and kind of connects them. That's what I'm talking about. And so, how does this go? I'll pause and let you ask your question, but this relates directly to accountability because, first off, when people aren't accountable, it's because they're not to others, because they're not accountable to themselves. Everything starts with the self.
Yeah.
If you're not trusting of others, or you don't show up as trustworthy, it's because you don't trust yourself. You don't see yourself as trustworthy. Everything that happens in the team or in the outer world is a reflection of how you perceive yourself or how you treat yourself. So accountability first starts with your own accountability to yourself. And when you're deeply committed to growth, that means you're deeply committed to excellence. That means you're deeply accountable to showing up as the best version of yourself every single day for your teammates, which then means that you're going to be radically accountable to your teammates. It's not something that you have to be reminded of or be rewarded for. It just is what you do. And this shows up in how you take care of your gear, how you take care of your teammates' gear, how you take care of, how you're, involved in making sure you can make everyone else's life easier. You know what I mean? You're not like, oh, I'm done with my part of this thing, and then you take off and go grab a beer. No, you wait and you help someone else out, right? And everyone's kind of like fighting to be the last one to leave, kind of thing. It's really incredible when everyone has that attitude, right? Of
I love that concept, fighting to be the last one to leave. It reminds me of actually a photo. I don't know if you ever watched rugby union and are familiar with the All Blacks. But they won the World Cup final after choking a few times. And they showed a picture of the dressing rooms afterwards. And I think they'd beaten England. I'm not quite sure who it was. But the opposing team's dressing room was an absolute shit tip. And the All Blacks dressing room was perfect. It was like it was before they came in, and they just won a World Cup final, right? So awesome? one of their big things is about sweeping the sheds, right? And it's the senior players that do it, right? So it's the senior players that do it. So I love that concept of fighting to be the last one to leave. That's a brilliant concept. But you said something there that is it's going to open up a little bit of a rabbit hole, where you talked about being and focusing on your being. I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy, and the Stoics talked about, and this is where our conversation is going to go, happiness, eudaimonia, flourishing, whatever you want to call it, that the key to that is arete, is your own character, right. is how you behave, especially when nobody is watching, right? So that character, what have you learned over the years? And here you can bring different parts of it in, right? So from the perspective of Navy SEALs, from martial arts, from your more spiritual side, which we can talk about. What have they told you about the importance of you as a being, or your character, or your arete, in overall life satisfaction, fulfillment? I don't like the term happiness because it's hard to pin down, and you can have it 1 minute and not have it the next. I prefer those terms such as fulfillment and flourishing. But what have you learned about that introspective side of reaching that fulfillment, flourishing, whatever you want to call it?
Well, it certainly is an unfolding and emergent quality. This idea of arete, I think there's a lot of misconception around this, because at first blush, it seems to people to mean that I do then I'm always behaving in an excellent manner. And so we have, 1% improvement hacks, and we have people, who are just relentless in their like you look at their task lists and it's got like, okay, and I fall prey to this. I'm going to do my breathing exercises, and I'm going to do my functional fitness, and I'm going to do my yoga, and I'm going to go to the, I'm going to do my jujitsu, and I'm going to, and I'm working to be 1% better every day. And all that is great ultimately. But that is also ultimately an obstacle to arete, because you can mistake the forest for the trees. You can mistake all that activity of doing things, and also getting better at doing things, like getting the black belt, and then the second-degree black belt, and the third-degree black belt. And I know people who are third, fourth, fifth, sixth-degree black belts who I would not call having arete
good character
in their life,
yeah
right?
yeah
They're all ego, right? So arete is about getting to a point where you move beyond the ego, and then you begin to shed the identity of needing to be perfect, the identity of thinking that more certificates, more degrees, more rankings, more blankety blank, insert whatever, more mountains climbed it equals me being a better person. And then once you find that point, there's this kind of turnaround. And the turnaround is from looking for that arete and that excellence outside of you through accomplishing things and through doing things, to surrendering and just removing the identity layers, and finding the true nature of your reality. And when you begin to remove those layers, and it's like peeling an onion or taking off layers and layers of clothing, starting with all the armor we put on, carry around as warriors, and most people carry around emotionally, and you get to that true essence, that beauty, that beautiful brilliance on the inside, that heart center, and from there, that's happiness. But it's happiness not from achievement. It's happiness not from accomplishment or having a strong body or a good looking boyfriend or girlfriend or tens of millions of dollars in the bank. It's actually more experienced as joy and bliss.
And it's interesting, you will have seen many people, as I have, particularly in the corporate world. And it's not just the corporate world, the fitness world, the martial arts world, where everything is geared towards those external achievements. And they have this belief that when I get there, that is going to bring me happiness. It's going to come through that recognition, that satisfaction, having done that. And then they often get there and realize that it's a void. And that can create existential crisis in people. And I have spoken to many senior executives who have worked their ass off to get to a certain point, and then realize that they've neglected their family, they've neglected their relationships, and the mountain wasn't about getting to the peak. I remember reading a book by Persig called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance as a 17-year-old.
That was one of my favorite books as a 20-year-old. I've read that 4 times.
Yeah. There was a bit in that book where he talked about this journey to the top of the mountain, and that people are rushing to get to the top of the mountain. And he said something that, just this one line that has always stuck with me: sometimes it's better to travel than to get there. Right?
That's right. The journey is not the destination.
Yeah, and arete, but arete is about how you do the journey.
That's right.
Well, isn't it?
It relates to his concept of quality. You remember that conversation he had about quality? He said quality is like, it's like, if a train is running down the track and you have this, it's barreling toward a destination, and the experience of being at the front of the train where the moment the air kind of splits. Right. And so this constant state of moment to moment experiencing the raw reality of your life with awareness, with presence, with open heart, that's quality. And that leads to an experience of flow and joy and bliss,
Mm.
right? And athletes find it, warriors find it accidentally, right? You know, like
Yeah.
Csikszentmihalyi talks about when the edge, when
Yes.
they're pushing that edge and they've got the skill level to be able to push that edge with grace, like an athlete,
Yes.
tossing the ball and they're in a flow state. Well, that's because your mind is poised right on that edge, and it happens at 0.01 to 0.049 seconds, right? Anything after that starts to become perceivable in memory.
Mm.
And so this is pre-memory radical attentiveness at the bleeding edge or razor's edge of awareness. That's what Pierce is talking about as the experience of quality, which I believe is the same as arete. But I think the Greeks were talking more about a longer term experience of living arete. But if you were
Yes.
to
Yes.
collapse it to a moment to moment, that's what they're talking about. And in that moment, you're not planning the future and you're not obsessing about the past, and you're completely present, which means your whole being is engaged in this because you haven't shunted the experience into memory and locked it off from your heart or from your whole mind.
Mm. And I think that that's the key thing, that term that you use is that full engagement.
Yes.
It is being completely in the presence. I think that's what the Stoics, the Buddhists, the Taoists, the Hindu all believe
They all
in,
try to
is
train
that
your mind to get back to that.
to get back to that present moment and have that full engagement. And I love the Japanese. I don't know if you've come across the Japanese concept of ikigai.
Of course, yeah.
Which is misrepresented in the West because of some guy putting something up on the internet that went viral. But the real ikigai, you can have ikigai over making yourself a cup of tea. You can have ikigai over tending your vegetables. It's about doing stuff for the joy of being fully in the moment with that stuff, right?
That's right.
Now that opens a conversation about, so you're a pretty spiritual guy now. Where did your spiritual journey start? Post SEALs or pre SEALs? And what started you on that spiritual journey?
That's a great question. It was definitely pre-SEALs. It had nothing to do with religion. I mean, there was some religion in my life. I was, my mom dragged me to church on Sundays, so that was my religion, right?
Yeah.
Episcopalian and I, it wasn't horrible, let's put it that way, but it wasn't something that I was connecting to. When I first began to experience what we would now call kind of spiritual experiences or altered states, the kind of ephemeral nature of reality through nature. And the reason it happened, I grew up upstate New York, and during the summers we would spend all of our time up on Lake Placid, and we have a summer home there, which was on the West Shore, and there's no road, so we would have boats, to get there, and we had no roads, and so our backyard was a mountain range, and our front yard was the lake,
Wow.
and it was unpleasant to be under the roof of the house because my dad was often raging and drinking, and so I'd like to spend a lot of time outside, and I got very comfortable being alone in nature. And this is what led me to being an endurance athlete, because I would run up and down the mountains of the Adirondacks alone. And I remember one experience where I ran up Whiteface Mountain, and these mountains aren't massive. I mean, it's not like Everest or something. They're only 4,000 feet from their ground level, at that ground level up the top. But
That's still a long way when you're running up it, Mark.
yeah, when you're running up with a little, it's like a like a trot. When you ruck and you're running, when you're rucking fast.
Yeah.
Like when I ruck with army guys, I'm like, Jesus, slow down. They're like running. So I would run up these mountains, fly past people, and I remember, these are not insignificant, like endeavors, right? Like I said, it could take hours. and they're exhausting but exhilarating. And I remember running to the top and getting up there and just this beautiful panoramic view on top of this white face mountain, and sitting down and yanking out my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and suddenly just having this like this intense experience of just raw presence, where it was almost a disassociated experience, where I was like,
interesting.
I'm not going to say it was an out of body experience, but I had this sense of just expanding beyond my body.
So verging on that, what they call an ecstatic experience.
It was an ecstatic. It was very close to like an out of body experience, but I certainly wasn't dead. I was completely alive, but I was absolutely exhilarated and exhausted, and my mind was completely clear. And at the same time, I was just in awe of the beauty and the moment. And I'd been immersed in nature, and I was alone those times, not like chattering it up or listening to an audiobook. And of course, we didn't have any of that. This is back in the 70s. And there's something powerful that happens in nature that you can only describe as spiritual when you spend a lot of time in nature alone. And you just allow your mind to kind of settle in and synchronize with the energy and the frequency of nature. And so that was what was happening to me. And that experience really, really stuck with me. And then when I went to I went to college, and I was a competitive swimmer. And
how old were you? Sorry, Mark, when you had that first
17, 16 maybe.
Yep.
So I was in the early stages of, just transition from high school to college. I was an endurance athlete in college. I took up rowing, swimming, and then in triathlons. But, a lot has been written about some of the qualities that accrue to, and you probably had these, I'm sure, the accrue to endurance athletics, right? Similar thing to what I experienced. You can get into these really, really cool mental states once you push through the initial stages of resistance, and especially if you, when I quite naturally, because of my swimming, got into these breath awareness and controlling my breathing and synchronizing my breathing to different running or hiking patterns, and then I learned how to develop a mantra, and to have that mantra be with me. So I was doing what a lot of things that are taught in the spiritual traditions. Mantra. I was doing breath control training, and I was using those on top of or on a foundation of physical health.
Yeah.
And so I was really developing spiritual practices without even understanding what they were. But it led me to my finest moments, or my most peaceful moments, were, either in the pool, at after 2,000 or 3,000 yards of training, or out on the trail, like that. Anyway, so now I graduated from that school, Colgate University, in 1985, and I got hired by a big public accounting consulting firm called Coopers & Lybrand. It's now PricewaterhouseCoopers, a global firm. And it was part of a program where they were sending me to NYU Business School to get my master's in accounting. And of course, I was going to get that, but transfer into the MBA program. So it was kind of a package deal for me. I was going to be an MBA in finance and a CPA, get 4 or so years of experience, and I was going to cash out of there and go into investment banking and make some real money.
Right.
That was kind of the plan, and it was kind of set out for me. Like it was an easy plan, because I wasn't the only one who had that plan. There was quite a few others, right? And I grew up in a business family, and so all this whole kind of story around business, money, going to a good, liberal arts school, getting your MBA. I mean, it's a classic story.
Yeah.
But that's all it is.
Laid out for you, right?
Yeah, that's all. It was just laid right out for me. But that's all it is a story, right? And I just bought into it, lock, stock, and barrel. My mind was trained to accept that as the norm, right? So anyways, there I am in New York, and I decide then that I'm going to keep up my training, right? There was some aspect of my being, is the warrior archetype in me that said, what, I'm not going to look like those pasty, fat people over there in those cubicles or on that trading floor, I said, that's not me. I think, I knew intuitively, even at that age, at 20, 21, that if you trained your body every day and you trained your mind and you fueled it well, that you could have, you could maintain a really solid, physical, healthy body for as long as you live.
Mm.
And yet I didn't see a lot of evidence around me, you know, especially in this Western culture, but I just knew it intuitively. And now I've since kind of proven it, right? Just
Yeah.
like you have. It is the truth, right?
Mm.
So I wasn't willing to allow myself to go soft. So I had this regimen. I would run every morning for 6 miles, come home, stretch, journal. Everyone would go to their high carb lunch and have a beer at lunch. I would go to the New York Athletic Club and bang out a workout. And then in the evening, they had to let me off at 5 so I could get down to the World Trade Center for evening class by 7:30, something like that.
So
Again,
that's for
most
your for
that
your
was for the
MBA class.
MBA, yeah.
Yeah.
And my peers would all go home and have dinner and, you know, change and do some studying or something. And I said, I got something to do. There's a training block there. So I was pondering what to do. I didn't want to go back to the gym. I didn't want to go for another run. I'm like, what could I do? So while I was having these thoughts, one day I'm walking back from the subway station on 23rd Street. My apartment building is on 22nd. And I walked past a martial arts studio, and it was a big one. And it was Sato Karate. It was the founder of the whole school, the whole style. And he had 300,000 or 400,000 students worldwide.
Wow.
Was there. That was his headquarters. It's called Hanbu headquarters. And I heard the screams upstairs, and I went up and I saw Mr. Nakamura on the training floor running a black belt class, and I was just blown away by what I saw, the presence he had and the quality of his just character. It was different than anything I'd ever seen. I was like, oh, wow. I said, I want that. I want whatever that is, whatever he's eating. So I signed up. Well, sure, he was a really good karateka. Like, he was world renowned. He was famous in Japan. I watched him break 6 blocks of ice about that thick, you know, maybe 7 or 8 inches thick, you know, each with just a tiny piece of wood between them, all stacked up. I watched him just shatter it with his forehead.
Wow.
You know, and if you and I tried that, our head would be in 27 pieces and we wouldn't be here anymore, you know. It's just crazy what I saw that the human body can do when trained, you know, in a disciplined manner over a long period of time. So I was like,
absolutely
fascinating. So I started to get, you know, started the physical training of toward my first degree black belt. And within a short order, I noticed that on Thursday evenings after the black belt class, there was a small group of individuals who would stay, and they would turn out the lights and light some candles. And I asked what was going on, and they said, "Oh, that's the Zen group." I said, really? Okay, what is that? You know, and they told me a little bit, and then I went and got a book on it, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki. Read up on it, and I was like, this is awesome. I want to do this. So I asked Nakamura if I could join. I was the only white belt, and there were only like 7 or 8 others out of hundreds in the school who would do that, or were doing it at the time. So I took up Zen meditation at 21 years old.
Wow.
Under the watchful eye of Mr. Nakamura. I turned it into daily practice, and I had some extraordinary experience. It took some time and was painful at first. You know, there was a lot of, you know, wanting to quit and wondering if I was doing it right, and, you know, mind wandering all over the place. But I really trusted him, and I was getting, you know, enough. I had enough of a foundation because of my endurance sports training and the experiences I had in nature that I could kind of relate those to what I was experiencing. And so my mind kind of caught the groove really easily.
Yeah.
And also, mind you, this is 1985, 86, 87. I'm not watching TV at night. We didn't have TV.
Yeah.
There was no internet. I'm not distracted with my cell phone. My brain hadn't been dopamine hacked like it is today.
Yes.
You know, and it was comfortable with long periods of silence, you know, from my upbringing. And so I feel very fortunate in that regard, right?
Yeah. Timing's everything, eh?
Timing, right. And also to have discovered meditation at that age, because now what we know about neuroplasticity, my brain was still growing. And so here I am, you know, I'm getting my MBA. I'm working in something entirely new. I'm training hard every day. I'm doing karate, and now I'm also meditating, and I'm also reading. And, you know, it's just an incredibly rich period of growth. And I just experienced these leaps of growth, leaps of insight, and it completely shattered, like, it led to my first existential crisis, because it completely shattered all the constructs that I've been growing up with.
Yeah.
like what was normal for me for a career. And I started to question this career I had taken on, even though it looked really darn good on paper. I mean, MBA, CPA, making a shite ton of money,
Yeah.
and
Living the American dream.
living the dream, right? And I knew that if I walked away from that, that I would, you know, have hailed upon me all sorts of ridicule and judgment, and especially from the family. And I didn't want to disappoint them, of course. It certainly wasn't in my wheelhouse to want to do that. So it really caused a lot of consternation when I suddenly looked at that, and I said, you know what, this is not right for me. What I'm doing is not right. I'm on the wrong path. But I was committed to finishing what I started, but I started to ask different questions. This is one of the things that is one of the beautiful outcomes of meditation, is you develop great self-awareness.
Yeah.
And you're able to deconstruct the stories, and you're able to ask better questions so that you can reconstruct a whole new story about what you think it means to be human, what your purpose is, why you're on this planet, and what you're going to do about it. And so I started to ask those questions. And as soon as I did, I started to get sensations and kind of very, what I call latent imagery. It wasn't the same as visualization or imagination, but just soft imagery that would reveal itself to me, very subtle. And feelings and everything that I was starting to feel and experience was pointing to this notion of being a warrior.
Interesting.
And yet here I was as an accountant. I did not feel like a warrior.
It's not the natural association, is it?
No.
Accountant and warrior.
To my accounting friends out there, I did not feel like a warrior. And you can certainly be a warrior as an accountant, but it's not the kind of warrior that I was feeling that I needed to be. So I started to ask, could I do that? Could I be that? Am I that? And what would that look like? Because initially it wasn't the military. I didn't come, into my early 20s thinking I was going to be a military or even Navy SEAL. I didn't even know what the SEALs were.
Right.
Yeah,
interesting.
didn't have TV shows about the SEALs.
Yeah.
And so once I started thinking, warrior, and asking what kind of warrior, how could that look? I started to explore different opportunities in my mind and just a little bit of research. And similar to how I uncovered the martial arts studio, I was just walking home one night, kind of in my mind pondering these things, and I walked past a Navy recruiting office, and I saw this poster on the wall, and the poster had the title of, it said, "Be Someone Special," and it had Navy SEALs doing cool shit. Didn't say anything about the SEALs. It just said U.S. Navy, be someone special. And I was like, whatever those guys are doing, that's it.
Yeah, interesting.
That's it. So I got my start in my spiritual practice. I would say that Zen became where I started to formalize my notion of a spiritual discipline, spiritual practice. But I was very in tune with it because of my warrior traditions, and Zen and the warrior, Zen and the martial arts are kind of hand in glove.
Absolutely.
And I also had a good mental foundation for it based upon my endurance training and my intimacy and love for nature. And so I never stopped training. I trained while I was in the SEALs and added different skills. And later on, I found yoga, the Vedic tradition of yoga, which I've got over 1,000 hours of teacher training and teaching in yoga. And I, found other martial arts, but I never found the spiritual side of the martial arts to be anywhere nearly as advanced and powerful as the yoga tradition was, which.
And I want to come to that yoga tradition, because I'm now looking for something, as you hit 50 and you get a bit creaky, starting to think
martial
about
arts is a young person's games.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm studying Aikido right now, and God, I wonder how long I'm going to want to get thrown and roll out of all these circumstances. And anyways, I'm with you on that.
I wanted to now talk, before we come to talking about yoga, you just said it was a throwaway line a little bit earlier on, but I want to dive into it. This warrior archetype. Talk to us a little bit about that. And a lot of people listening here are going to be thinking that this is very machismo, right? All macho, rah. I suspect that it's, it absolutely can be, but there's other ways, isn't there?
That's right. There's different faces of an archetype. Right? So first off, my experience is that a calling and a purpose in life if you're looking for it, everyone has it. And if you're looking for it, this kind of goes back to the ikigai concept.
Mm.
If you're looking for it in a vocation or a job, you're looking in the wrong place,
Yeah.
because your calling or your purpose really is an archetypal energy, such as healer or poet or warrior or mother even.
Mm.
And it can change, but generally there's a dominant, right? And this is why those things like the Enneagram and even Jungian psychology kind of talk about these archetypes.
Do you know what, Mark? Just as you're on that subject, I've done lots of those personality questionnaires and stuff. The one that nailed me to the wall was Enneagram.
Enneagram's very powerful. I think that, and that's the most ancient, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so like when I do the Enneagram, the warrior is dominant. And it's like, but then there's other kind of sub-archetypes that can be brought to the fore or that you're going to want to explore. So when I looked at it, when I was in my 20s, when I had that feeling, I want to be a warrior. Well, it was warrior athlete and then warrior leader. And then as I got more mature in the military, it became, more, maybe a strategist. But then what was really valuable for not defining myself as a Navy SEAL or thinking that my future was to be a Navy SEAL admiral is I really soon grew out of needing this or wanting or even, feeling I could be involved in the organizational structure of the military, because it's difficult to grow beyond the stage of, the collective stage of consciousness of the organization you align with. And so I felt really stuck in the organization of the SEALs, even though I really loved the team and I loved the mission. And so as I continued to grow and moved from, warrior leader into the warrior statesman and warrior teacher kind of mode, I could do a little of that in the military, but my consciousness was expanding to where that I felt really stuck, and that it really contracted me. And that in order to grow further, I needed to get out. And that's why I left the military active duty, but I stayed in the reserves for a few years, just mainly to kind of finish out my career as a commander and vest the retirement, right? To be quite frank.
Yeah.
It's hard to walk away from that after spending many, many years. And I did really love aspects of it. I didn't want to feel constrained as like, this is my full-time thing. So by leaving and getting into entrepreneurship and then getting into teaching and writing, it allowed me to continue to expand beyond, the warrior leader into these other realms. And so now you would say that I'm kind of moving into the warrior monk phase, right? Where I'm really much more tapping into and experiencing and wanting to develop those more spiritual qualities. And of course, those always existed in the warrior traditions. And again, think about the ancient samurai and the ninjutsu who did, most of their work after the youthful years of developing the skills was in the mental and spiritual aspect of their being, right?
Absolutely.
And it's what allowed them to have that spontaneity and that precision, to be like, be able to sit on a bench in perfect equanimity and then to explode into action spontaneously, right? Without thought,
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by archetype. Had I defined myself on the doing side of things in terms of like achieving something like a admiral flag rank in the SEALs or a certain thing in the business world, then it would have constricted me. And also I would have had another one of those existential crises where I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of stuck here in this organization and my spirit is saying I'm supposed to be over here.
It's quite interesting you talk about that. I had a similar sort of experience that, and I was in the military a lot less than you, 8 years, but through that time, I became very interested in shamanism and spent a fair bit of time in the South American jungles with shamans, and just felt that the military was not the place for me to continue to develop, right? So it's interesting that you had that similar journey a little bit ahead of me. Now you are very into the whole yoga practice. So talk to us a little bit about your entry into that and what you've learned from that yoga practice, both the physical, the spiritual.
Sure. Well, it just so happens I was had moved up from Coronado, where the SEALs have their home, and where I had a business. I started a brewing company there, Coronado Brewing Company. I got into a little bit of a battle with my partners, who were my brothers-in-law, and you can imagine how kind
Ooh,
of
nasty.
nasty that got. And so I wanted to get away from there, and I left Coronado behind, which also meant I left my martial arts studio behind, and I moved up north, County San Diego, about half an hour north, to a town called Encinitas, and couldn't find really any martial arts up here. Actually, I did find one for a while. I found ninjutsu, and I studied that for 4 years. And I was right on the cusp of my black belt, and the guy shut his school down. He wasn't making
No.
any money. I know, literally like 3 weeks before. I was like,
Yeah,
well,
no.
or 3 months before. At any rate, I said no big deal. So I started looking around, and around this time, Encinitas is a big yoga epicenter.
Yeah,
A
I
lot of
think I've been through there. Yeah.
a lot of some of the most earliest teachers of yoga, in the California, came to either San Francisco or down here, and they were in Encinitas, and it's a very spiritual community. Tons of surfing and yoga, and right down the road from where I am right now is the Self-Realization Fellowship, was founded by a yogi named Paramahansa Yogananda, and so I learned about him, and I got his book called The Autobiography of a Yogi. And this is actually, it's interesting. It's the only book that Steve Jobs had on his iPad that he would read over and over when he was traveling. And Steve Jobs was a Zen practitioner.
Oh, right. Okay.
And yeah, and he was really inspired by this book. Anyway, so in this book, Yogananda talks about his journey with yoga, but also all these great masters that he met in India, and some of the most extraordinary stories of what these yogis were able to do just was so inspiring and so like, whoa. And it reminded me kind of some of the things that I saw with Nakamura, some of the advanced martial arts, and also the longevity and vibrancy that I saw in he and his senior students. And I'm like, there's something here. So I kind of dove in. I found something called Ashtanga Yoga, which is really kind of a rigorous yoga.
A bit more active, isn't it? I think that's the one that appeals. It's one that appeals to me right now, because I'm wanting something a little bit active.
As a physical practice, it's a good place to start, especially if you're aggressive. But it has some serious limitations. Right? A lot of people get injured. The practice was developed by a guy named Patabi Joyce to train youth for the military.
Right.
And so it has a bit of discipline, right? And so there is a real kind of feeling of like a martial art to it, and you progress through these series, and they're very difficult poses, and it's an aggressive practice. You can use it as an exercise regimen,
right?
But so I did that for a number of years, like 4 or 5 years, and then I began to, I kept doing my reading, and I stumbled upon more and more texts from the Vedic tradition, Bhagavad Gita, and then I stumbled upon the foundational philosophy of what yoga really is, and it's called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And when I read that a number of times, it just blew my mind open. And then I started to get into teacher training, and they were all teaching Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and the foundational philosophy of yoga. And I realized yoga is a science of training the mind. It has very little to do with the physical postures.
Interesting.
The physical postures, the stretchy bendy, was really a Western innovation.
Right.
And it was from the YMCA people over in Europe who were going over to India, and they were basically blending gymnastics with the asanas that they found in India.
Is that right?
And then they brought it back to Europe, and then that kind of came over to the United States. And so a lot of the vinyasa and the flow yoga and all this. But Ashtanga yoga was, like I said, that was different. That was developed in southern India to train military, and that had a similar quality to it. And so there was some of that's true, and some of it's maybe fantasy. But the physical practice really was designed to get the body healthy and open, and so you could sit comfortably in meditation.
Interesting. Lead with the body, right?
Yeah, lead with the body. And this is foundational to why I teach physical fitness and physical preparedness as the first of our 5 domains: physical, mental, then emotional, then intuitive, and then spiritual. Now, ultimately, we do them all together, but if the physical structure isn't strong and solid, then you're not going to be very successful with the mental development. And this is why people fail with meditation. But it's also why I succeeded, because I was an athlete. And it's why athletes have a better time with meditation, is because their body isn't all anxious and agitated and hyper aroused. They've got the tools and mechanisms to have that equanimity and balance in the body. But even in a sense of like, I'm going to go practice today, get the energy out first through movement, and then sit in meditation. That's the way it was taught.
The interesting, I want to come back to that in a little second, but so I talk to a lot of people around mental health and resilience, and there's a lot of, you'll have seen it from COVID. Everybody's a bloody resilience expert, and lots of it is about self-care and self-compassion and all this. And I say that's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Say to people, if you want good mental health, you need to lead with the body, the mind,
physical
the brain.
Health has a massive effect on your mental health and your psychological well-being and your mood and your optimism and your positivity. And, the fact check there is just go for a week without working out and tell me how grumpy you get. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How anybody can be in optimal mental state without doing some element of physical activity is beyond me. In fact, I think it's probably impossible.
It is, but they don't have the reference point. So they'll say, yeah, it is. But it's not accurate. And, I think to be fully integrated as a human being, you begin with the body, and then you recognize that, and when you start training the mind, that the mind is the body. The body is the mind. There's no separation.
Well, it all come from René Descartes, right?
That's right.
With dualism, when Galileo was being persecuted by the Catholic Church. And René Descartes basically later said, that dualism stuff, I made it up. Just so as I could practice science, right? And then we've had this whole split from Eastern and Western traditions, medicine, philosophy, all coming out of that dualism. So, and your journey has brought you back to that, well, I suppose you were always there, weren't you, from that endurance athlete, that linkages between the body and the mind.
But it's a progressive, the more you practice in an integrated fashion, the more integrated you become. And the more you realize how much our Western world has trained you to be separate component parts, which then separates you from yourself, which separates you from others, and it separates you from nature. And if you're separated from yourself, others, and nature, guess what? You're not going to be flourishing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not going to have that peace of mind and the equanimity we're talking about. So we have to, in fact, yoga is a process of reintegration. It means to yoke the body and the mind, to yoke the spirit and the mind, to yoke the body, mind, and spirit, to yoke the non-dual with the dual, to be able to integrate. That's what yoga means. It's a practice of reintegration.
So, Mark, I am aware of time here, but I really can't let you go without, I think it would be very valuable for our audience members to understand what a typical day in the life of a true warrior looks like. And I use the term warrior from that more shamanistic Zen, but that combination of both physical and mental and spiritual. So what does a typical Mark Devine day look like?
Right. First of all, a warrior generally doesn't have a typical day because they love variety and spontaneity.
Give us a couple of snapshots then.
Okay, I'll give you some snapshots. Generally speaking, I like, for instance, this week is a big creative week for me. I had a lot of podcasts, a lot of webinars and presentations and stuff. And so it's an intense creative week for me. But generally speaking, my morning ritual has me do a lot of those things I was kind of laughing about earlier that are kind of like doing, but I do them because I enjoy it. I don't mistake the forest for the trees. And they do generally provide a nice foundation for winning in the day. And I call the whole practice winning in my mind before stepping in the battlefield. And this classic Sun Tzu quote, that victorious warriors win in their mind and then go to war. Yeah. Everyone else goes to war hoping to win. So that involves waking up and immediately beginning my mental training and my breath training, right? Even while I'm laying in bed. We call it the first words of the warrior, the words you say to yourself. So
Interesting.
my mantra, my gratitude practice. Then I'll drink some fresh water to top off the body battery.
Yeah.
And then I'll return, and I do the rest of my practice in bed. And so it means practice of box breathing. And then I go through a whole process of remembering who I am. And it's basically revisiting my purpose, my mission, and my ethos, and my vision, 5-year vision and 10-year vision. And then I have my wife joins me this practice. She's got her own version of it, but it's really powerful to do this with your significant other. It's incredible. You want to develop a relationship, then practice together your spiritual and emotional development. It's incredible. So then we have some contemplation activities from spiritual texts that we will read together, and then we'll meditate. And then that kind of takes us all about an hour, and it's just very, very pleasant way to start the day. And I haven't done any exercise. I haven't blasted off to the gym. I haven't gotten up and done 50 squats or none of that. I don't need that yet.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a smoothie. I'll make a smoothie. I sip that smoothie for like a couple hours. I don't really drink it all right away because I don't want to get all that all the carbs into me that early. So I generally will have that as my brunch and finish it off around 11 o'clock. Anyway, so then from there, I'll come down to our home away from home, which is another property we own down in town, Encinitas. And we rent out part of it, and the other part we use as my little training facility and my podcast studio. It's where I am right now.
Oh, yeah, nice.
And I got a sauna, I got a pool, I've got my gym set up, all that kind of stuff. And we'll do our asana, our yoga practice, or we'll do our physical yoga practice. And it's a sequence that I developed, and we do a version of it almost every day. We change it up a tiny bit, but we do that together. And then we do our physical training, which will include weights and high intensity workout. And I'll finish up with a sauna and a cold plunge into the pool.
Nice.
That whole process, I can get done by 9. Sometimes it's 9:30. I try not to take any appointments before 9:30, 10 o'clock if I can get away with it.
Yeah.
It's because it's that important to me, and it's also more it's that enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like we just love it. And if I miss it, like the quality of my day is just dramatically different. There's some other nuances to it, but so then I'll have things like this. I have throughout the day, I'll have a number of podcasts and meetings. If I have any spare time, obviously I'll do correspondence, or I'll break out a project that I'm working on for my doctorate.
What's your doctorate in, by the way?
Global Leadership and Change.
Oh, wow.
Pepperdine University. Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, but during the day I'll do little what I call spot drills. It could be just a walk around the block. It could be 50 squats. It could be box breathing, and so that's kind of stacking my practice.
Yeah, yeah. I like that concept of spot drills. I talk a lot about movement snacks.
Yeah, like a snack, like that's the same thing as a spot drill. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the more training time you get off the mat, then the more it slowly just seeps into who you are, right? So now it's not like I don't have to think about a spot drill.
It's just ingrained.
It's just ingrained in you, and ultimately your practice is wherever you are, when you are. You travel with it, right? It goes wherever you are. So then I have an evening ritual as well, and the evening ritual happens right before I re-enter home, and that's about recapitulation. So in my mind, I'll go back and I'll have a journal, and I'll go back and visualize the day from the morning ritual up until that point. And what I do is I revisit all the interactions, and I ask, how did it go? What did I learn? And what could I have done better? And this is where I surface opportunities to clear shit up. Like if I said something that wasn't ideal, or I could have done something better, or I forgot to take a note and write something down. So I get it all out of my head. And oftentimes this will lead to like me sending a note and saying, hey, sorry about that. I could have done better. Or I forgot to follow up on that. Let's hit this up tomorrow. And this way you don't go to bed with any regrets, and you sleep much better because you don't have the stuff coming to you at night in your subconscious. And I call that my regret eradication practice, because if you can deal with regrets in real time, boy, you're so much better off. So that's kind of a day, I spend in the evening with my wife. My wife and I have a pretty, we just have fun together. I feel very blessed in that regard. We have
Yeah,
fun together.
nice.
So we'll make dinner often times together, barbecue or do something like that. And we live on the ocean, so we always love to watch the sunset and check out the dolphins playing in the waves. It's pretty
Yeah.
idyllic in that
So, yeah,
regard.
no. Yeah, yeah.
That's
Okay,
that's
good.
a snapshot for you.
Yeah. That's a pretty
Now,
cool
I do
snapshot.
like to do, occasionally go kick my ass, with a ruck or something hard.
Mm,
Even though my workouts are hard, I'm not doing 3-4 hour workouts every day like I
yeah,
used to. I just don't have the time for it, nor do I need it. Like it's less is more,
yeah,
especially when you get
yeah.
older and you
Get
can
smarter.
maintain easier, get smarter.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And how
Mhm.
important do you think it is for people to get comfortable with being uncomfortable? If they are
Yeah,
going to,
death by comfort. One of my sayings with SEAL Fit is "easy makes us weak." In fact, one of my
nice.
students used that for a title of his book, which is all about his experiences going through our 50-hour SEAL Fit Kokoro camp. Yeah, so getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is a never-ending process, and it's just part of expanding your
Mm,
capacity, and that has a mental, physical, and emotional component to it, and even a spiritual component. It doesn't have to be hard, right? So
mm,
when we get effective at this principle, people think it always that hard has to be suffering,
yeah,
and you can change your relationship to hard so that it's actually really, really joyful. Andy Huberman talks about the dopamine. You actually train your dopamine system so that you get dopamine from the intrinsic reward, not just the extrinsic.
yeah, yeah. And that's
And
that's
so that's what
that's the
happens.
key, right? Is
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
have that intrinsically driven rather than
Mhm.
constantly, what's the next goal? What's the next achievement? What's the
Right.
next box to tick?
That's right.
But it comes back to Arate, right?
That's right. This
I
is
think it's
very similar.
connected.
I agree.
So, Mark, tell us, where can people find out more? I know you've got oodles of courses, books, and things that people can sign up to. So, talk to us a little bit about those for people who will be listening and going, I actually
People from
would
your
like to
community
follow
would,
the warrior.
yeah, they would probably like the SEAL Fit. SEAL Fit doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be like, oh, insurmountably hard. We do have that, right? We love our 50-hour camp, Kokoro camp or program. We run it now once a year. It used to be many times a year, but it's an extraordinary program. We have so many Australians actually who've come to it, and Brits, and Irishmen. You would love it, by the way. So
Right,
it's an incredible event. We have that in July, but we also have a 24-hour, a 12, and a 6-hour version.
right,
And
okay,
so you can kind of crawl, walk, run. In
interesting.
23, we're really tapping into the vein of the hero's journey, and we're launching these 4 quests. And the quests are like it's a 90-day heroic journey where you're going to be able to embrace the suck and dive into different aspects of your growth. So the first quarter is going to be the quest to be SEAL fit. So that's like the physical and mental training model that we
Foundation.
develop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it has a challenge to it. So it's a daily challenge for I think 6 weeks, and then group coaching and an event. And the event is here in California. So it's basically close to a 3-day event where we teach all the skills in an immersive training environment. It's going to be incredible. And then the second quarter is going to be the quest to be unbeatable. It's where we teach the full integrated 5 mountain development model: physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual. And also, same thing, a challenge, group coaching, virtual
Yeah.
group coaching, and an event. And then the third quarter is the quest for your inner warrior. And that's where
Mm.
we teach all the spiritual practices and the integrated yoga movement practices we call Kokoro yoga, etc. And then the last quarter is the quest to be sheepdog strong. And this is where we teach you how to deal with a crisis. And, so it's like um, firearms training, self-defense through quick reaction drills, dealing with an ambush, and then learning how to do field medical trauma in case someone gets injured or you come across an
Yeah.
accident. So you learn how to
Yeah.
deal with the
Wow.
situation instead of being one of the ones pulls their phone out and videotapes it. We're really excited about that, and so that's
Bet you are.
happening. And
Wow. That's a lot of work going into that, I would imagine.
yeah, our team is just throwing their heart into that. information all at Seal Fit, and we'll have a big promotion coming out pretty soon, probably around Labor Day, or not Labor Day, but Black Friday for that. SealFit.com. My personal website, markdevine.com, is, you know, where I have my podcast and my blog, and my books are kind of all listed there, which are all available over at Amazon, which is where everyone buys their books nowadays.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's mainly it. I mean, we have another property called unbeatablemind.com, but I think you can find all that stuff. Like, we have a coaching program and coach certification, and we do corporate training. All that information is at unbeatablemind.com.
Cool. And I will stick all of these links into the show notes for people. Do you do anything on the Kokora Yoga? Do you have any instructional stuff around that?
That we do. That's all part of our community. So you can find that at SealFit or unbeatable.com, unbeatablemind.com. It's all part of our community, and then that's the third quest. So that's where we really dive into the Kokora Yoga challenge with a daily, you know, practice, and then we have a 3-day event. We'll be teaching those principles. That would be a good one for you to come up to.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, sounds like it. Mark Devine, thank you for the very generous use of your time. There's been so many insights to this for people, just everyday people, to understand that whole warrior mindset, and somebody who has actually lived the practice and gone from military endurance athlete into all of the martial arts and then the yoga and the spiritual journey. Mate, you are an absolute legend. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to meet you. Hoo-yah.
Mate, that was fucking awesome.
That's a great one. Great interview style. It was really fun. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was very, very cool. I'll release that in probably 2 or 3 weeks, and I'll shoot you a note whenever it's being released.
Awesome.
But that was brilliant.
We'll pump it out on our social media as well. Awesome. Cool. Let me know if I can help out with anything. It's really enjoyed meeting you, and maybe you'll come up here someday and do some training.
Yeah, I'd love to. Absolutely love to. Long way to go, but we'll get there someday.
I know it is. Gosh.
I nearly
we need the hypersonic jet quick.
I know. Yeah, that's exactly it. Exactly. But I'm definitely interested in that Kokora Yoga, because I've stopped boxing. I've stopped doing my martial arts. I've stopped doing my soccer. Golf isn't just enough.
Golf isn't enough. I know.
I still do weights and
yoga,
stuff.
You would enjoy yoga. Kokora Yoga is like a hybrid between Tai Chi, Qigong, and yoga.
That's what I'm after, because I used to do Tai Chi 30 years ago, and I loved it, and I just can't find a Tai Chi teacher.
It's difficult, yeah. But, you know, there's enough you can do on your own, and we got great videos also to support it. Right. And just like anything else, you don't need to go super fancy, right? It's just it's the fundamental basic movements just done repetitively where you get the money.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll look it up.
All right, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
Nice to see you. You're welcome. Yep.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.